Okay. So I've worked for CBS for 20 years this year. I started on the 10 o'clock news, a general assignment reporter. Worked about a year and a half in our Boulder bureau before we closed it. I'm from Boulder, so when I had kids, that was a treat to be able to work there. And I started covering politics in 2010, was assigned the beat after my husband, Raj Chauhan, left, and he did our fact checks of political ads, and they asked me to take that over, and after that, take over the political beat because our political reporter at the time, Terry Jessup, left. So I've been covering politics here at the Capitol since 2011.
Great, thanks. Again, I'm Ed Sealover with the Denver Business Journal. I've been in Colorado for 18 years now. Spent 7.5 years at the Colorado Springs Gazette, covering City Hall and politics first, then coming up here to be their legislative bureau. Spent 7.5 wonderful months at the Rocky Mountain News as their legislative and political reporter before that paper met its demise. And since then, I have been at the Denver Business Journal. As Tony said, I cover a wide range of beats. We have 5 reporters on our staff, so we all juggle a lot of balls, but the main one from January through May is covering the legislature, covering state government, and most importantly, I cover it as the interaction of business and government. Joey knows that when he's off to cover a 7-hour hearing on, say, guns or the death penalty, I'm laughing at him because I'm not going to that hearing. I focus strictly on transportation, regulations, taxes, things that affect you and how you run your business.
I've been in Colorado now for 16 years. I've been 2 years. Bill Anschutz hired me to start Colorado politics, and I hope you all click on it every day because my job depends on it. And if I don't have this job, I might be wanting to work for you, and you don't want that. So I was at the Denver Post for a number of years. I've covered a variety of beats there from breaking news. But, you know, a story's a story. I don't see a story as news or politics or business. A good story is always a good story. And as we're going to talk about today in dealing with the media, is finding storytellers in your organization and let them tell stories. Well, you know, I've been around for a long time in politics. This is the 4th state house I've worked in. And you know, in the 80s, all these things that seem like these great ideas, like getting rid of the line item veto, you know, redistricting, getting rid of gerrymandering and things like that, it's funny how they kind of come back around. You know, the line item veto, get rid of that pork barrel politics. We were all talking about pork barrel politics in the 80s. Got to get rid of the pork. Well, now there's nothing to negotiate with, and the only loyalty that you have is to your party. I remember last year, House Bill 1242, the big transportation bill that was that collapsed. We started the session saying, oh, we've got to fix transportation. And then ultimately, the Republicans retreated to the Republican camps, and the Democrats retreated to the Democratic camps. And why is that? Because we've drawn all these safe districts that, you know, if you're a Democrat, you're going to win that seat. So the party kind of decides who gets to be the elected official, not the people so much, because of the way the districts are drawn. So at the end of the session, when I couldn't believe that we didn't come out of that with some kind of transportation deal, my friend Eric Sonderman said that, you know, if you're a Republican, you're never going to pay a price in a Republican primary for being against a tax hike. And if you're a Democrat, you're never going to pay a price in a Democratic primary for defending social services. But you could pay a price if you don't follow the party line. You could get primaried and lose your seat. So that's changed. You know, people used to could make deals. That doesn't happen so much anymore. And you know, people used to could disagree without it turning into a big war. I've seen that change over the last 3 years. You know, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill could work things out behind the scenes. You know, Bill Clinton was a deal maker. We don't make deals anymore. We belong to parties. I think that's changed over the 3 decades I've been doing this.
I'm going to jump in and agree with Joey there. I think part of the problem is the party primary system. Even in the 12 sessions I've been covering here, I've seen the party primary system on both sides produce more dogmatic and ideological candidates than it was when I got here. I think it's widening the divide. I wrote a column when John Hickenlooper became governor that he was plucking all of the moderates from both parties out of the chamber to fill his cabinet when he started, and I don't think they've ever been replaced. There's not a lot of people in this building you would call moderates anymore. It's interesting because I think while I started out saying, I'm glad I don't cover social issues, one of the reasons is because I don't think there's any middle ground. I don't think there's actually any point in covering them anymore. You know what the vote is going in. It's all about the arguments, and I don't think that's going to change. I do think there is middle ground for business issues. I think we are still seeing these as fungible assets. In fact, I think that business issues have become more of a place to debate as the parties have hardened on social issues. And I think while I agree with Joey that last year's road funding bill collapsed under the weight of both parties, I think you see them coming right back to it this year because they feel like, hey, this is somewhere we can actually get something done. I mean, transportation is going to be a long slog in this session, and there are changes every day, but it's an area where there's not as much strict dogma in both the parties. And so I guess that's my way of telling you all that when you're here talking to your legislator, talking to other legislators on business issues, I think you actually have a chance that they're going to hear you and want to listen to what kind of suggestions you might make. If you're coming down here to talk to them on guns, don't waste your time. I think they've already made up their minds.
I tend not to cover the social issues down here either, and I understand why the lawmakers will carry those same bills year after year after year dealing with the social issues, because their constituents demand it. And I agree too. I think politics has become very cult-like. People put their blinders on and they just follow what the party says down here, rather than thinking outside of the box and compromising. On business issues, I mean, transportation, the bill passed unanimously out of the Senate. That's a big deal that they were able to reach a compromise on that, and we'll see what happens in the House. I think they will probably get that done, but there are still, I think, business issues where you're not going to see compromise. The Civil Rights Commission, a perfect example. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that when the Senate passes something with some changes to that commission, maybe some more small business representation on it, attorney representation on it, and what the House does with that. You asked if changes down here, and you didn't touch on this, but we're a smaller group down here covering the Capitol too. For CBS 4, I'm it in terms of politics. I'm the only one who covers politics for our station. Occasionally other reporters will pick up one of the stories that I've done, but I cover federal, state, local, everything. And I don't know, how many reporters do we have down here these days? Not very many.
Maybe.
Yeah, it is shrunk considerably. It's a really small Capitol press corps down here. And so I think that impacts what we're able to cover. You can only cover so much when it's just one of you down here. So coming into this today, I was thinking I felt a little guilty that I haven't covered more business issues this year, because I do like those bills, and occasionally you do see compromise on those bills. But this year, it seems with the sexual harassment issues down here, I've not been able to get at those so much. So.
If I'm going to go into great depth explaining the importance of the pension reform system to business leaders, it's not going to get nearly as many hits as if I write about the new celebrity chef opening a restaurant here in town, which I also write about. In general interest papers, it's the difference between writing about a business or a political issue and writing about a triple homicide. The old phrase, if it bleeds, it leads, is not just about what newspapers think is news. It's about what people tune into. So it's a tight rope we walk there. I mean, I want people to read more enlightened pieces, more educational pieces, but if I'm only going to do at-length deep dive stories, I'm afraid that people aren't going to read, period. So that's not an excuse for feeding outrage, but while you say, hey, yeah, we do help to feed the outrage, sometimes the outrage comes looking to us to see if we have it or not.
Right, that's a good point to make, too. I get asked, why don't you run more positive news? Because people don't watch, and we're a business, and we're about making money, like all of your businesses out there. So we put on the air what we think people are going to watch. And a lot of that, frankly, is bad news. Although I'm a political reporter, so I don't always cover the bad news. I do cover policy issues, and I do have a reputation for that down here, of picking up bills that are policy-oriented, not just the Republican versus Democrat fight down here, the sport of politics, if you will.
You know, there's you want to talk about fake news? I can give you two great fake news websites right now, and there'll be a bad story about me in both of them tomorrow. Is Peak Politics and Colorado Polls, because they're written by conservative and liberal activists. And then, you know, come on, guys. They know this is true, too. Sometimes you see the story and you're like, oh, come on. You know, but then the people that are reading those websites who are Democrats or Republicans, you know, they don't know that that's people that went into that story with an agenda. You know, we talked about legislative hearings where the vote's decided. Hey, I'm going to tell you, a lot of times I can start writing the story as soon as the hearing starts because I know what the vote's going to be at the end, and I'm rarely ever wrong. But there are reporters in this building that are not credentialed, but they're here doing political journalism for partisan websites that, you know, they've got their minds made up what the story is right from the beginning. And, you know, I've been doing this, as you know, for a long, you can look at me and tell, look how I'm beaten down. I've been doing this for a long time. And the most important skill, a reporter has to have a lot of skills, but one of them is the ability to check yourself. You know, is this right, or is this what I think is right, or is this what's right because it makes it easier for me to write the story? Now that's what you get when you get professional journalists who have a sense of integrity and personal pride. And then, you know, even if you disagree with the Denver Post, disagree with Colorado Politics, disagree with the Business Journal or any of the TV stations, at least you know they have a standard of fairness that they live by. A lot of these people out here, you know, if you get a phone call from a reporter, first I would encourage you to Google him and then call Tony. He knows all of us, and say, you know, is this a credible person, or is this somebody that's, you know, and if a reporter won't tell you what story that they're working on, if they're playing cat and mouse with you, be careful, because, you know, I don't want anybody to be surprised about what the story is. After they talk to me, I don't want them to be surprised. I've had to call people back before and tell them that the story changed. Did they want to change their comments, or did they want to talk about this new angle? Because, you know, that's what mature, credible journalists do. But then, as I say, there's a lot of bloggers, a lot of people on the internet that are there to mislead you, and Twitter's even worse. So, I think reporters have changed. They're younger, they don't have the experience. I came up through small newspapers, very small newspapers. And, you know, when I wrote a story, I was going to see the person I wrote that story about at the Kiwanis Club meeting. You know, I was going to run into those people at the grocery store. And what I learned from that was accountability. And, you know, I mentioned a minute ago all the things that a reporter has to have in their toolbox. You know, they do have to have healthy skepticism. They have to have a sense of fairness. You know, they have to have a sense of respect for themselves and their profession. But you know what else they need? They need compassion. We've lost that in journalism. We've lost that in society. But you know what compassion is? I started out as a high school sports writer at a small town paper. And compassion is the thing that will make you leave out the name of the kid who dropped the ball and lost the game. But compassion is also the thing that will make you stop and say, am I sure, before I damage somebody's reputation? Because you can't fix it after you've damaged somebody's reputation. And if I'm not sure, I'm going to go do some more reporting, or I'm not going to do the story. Because sometimes the most important story you do is the one you don't write.
I am gonna throw this in, and yeah, I do think there are a lot more websites, particularly that are dedicated to putting across their message. I mean, and it's just a veiled attempt to foment an ideology rather than actually seek out news. That said, I think it's good in some ways that we've seen some of these news organizations and websites come out from nowhere, because they also hold us in check. The days are gone when the idea that the Denver Post or the long-lost Rocky Mountain News wouldn't cover something means that that story isn't going to get out into the public. Now, it may be a story that's being covered in such a way that you want to bang your head against the wall and ask, are you really seeking the truth in this? But the idea that even websites that we don't necessarily like the way they come about, hold us accountable and make sure that we are going after stories, especially in a day and age when I'm sure you all know the resources of news organizations are deteriorating, is in some ways a good thing. For you, I would say if you are worried about who you're talking to and whether they will give you a fair shake, I would do just as kind of Joey advised or Tony advised, and that is look up the publication, look up who they are. Read a couple of stories. You'll figure out quickly whether this is somebody who really honestly wants to educate the public or wants to just put their ideas down your throat. But I'm actually a little more okay with the idea that there are disparate news sites out there these days, because it makes sure that everything gets out. It's just a matter of we all have to hold ourselves to a higher standard of how that gets out.
In terms of pitching a story, for me, I'm always looking for the personal angle. So if you're going to pitch a story, I want to know how it's going to matter to somebody.
Feel free to reach out to us. Understand that we're all juggling a lot of balls. I think for a lot of us, emailing is the easiest way to reach us because that'll at least let us get back to you when we have a second, rather than you calling us up on deadline and us screaming that we don't have time, which isn't an attack on you. It's an attack on why is the world closing in on me? I need more time. And yeah, I mean, if you're worried about interacting with the media, just tell us, look, I'm not familiar with this. I don't know how to do this. I'm not used to talking with you. I mean, it's something that we understand. And none of us are going to be calling you, unless you're doing something wildly illegal, in order to trap you in a corner and make you look bad. If we're calling people, we're calling them because they can add knowledge and add information to the story that others can't add. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, tell us. You know, we're willing to work around your parameters for how you work too.
So know what your story is before you try to start telling it, or